Welcome back to your Friday Buckeye Talk from cleveland.com. Last one before the spring game. Not really about the spring game, though. We have some recruiting stuff that we need to talk about, and it's partially about the spring game because there's going to be a bunch of visitors there. Just a reminder, it's $7 a ticket, I think, Nathan. Is that right, to get into the spring game? I believe that's correct.
I think that's right.
And you can show up and get in. Ryan Day said Wednesday that they had sold 50,000. There was a time, right, when Urban the one year was like, we want to get over 100. We want to get over 100. We want to get over 100. Made it like a big deal. Ohio State is always way up there. But if you want to go, it's a nice warm day in the forecast for Columbus on Saturday afternoon. Noon, right, Nathan? Noon kickoff for the game?
Noon. Yep. Tickets are $7 with some, there are some reserved seats you can get for more than that.
But you and your kids don't need reserve seats. It's fine. So you can show up. You can be in Ohio Stadium. You can watch a bunch of good Ohio State football players play against each other. You can get a look at young guys like Kenyatta Jackson and Sonny Styles and Jermaine Matthews and Carnell Tate and Jelani Thurman, in addition to a bunch of returning guys like JT Tuimoloau and Cade Stover. Obviously, Marvin Harrison Jr. Some injured guys, right? Noah Meka-Ibuka. No Tommy Eichenberg. Who else are the big injuries? If we don't want people showing up, Nathan, and being like, what? No, this guy? No Travion Henderson. Limited Mayan Williams, but we should see him a little bit. Who else do we want to make sure people aren't going to be sad to not see? No Steel Chambers. No Xavier Johnson.
Julian Fleming.
Julian Fleming, right, because it was Emeka and Julian
James.
Who were both. Jacob James. Oh, well, now don't even go.
Jahad Carter sounds like was on the fence whether he'll be able to play. We saw him get hurt in practice a couple weeks ago. I think that's
Mitchell Melton. Yeah.
Mitchell Melton, Evan Pryor.
Good guys. Evan Pryor. A lot of good guys to see. I endorse the spring game. So, stamp of approval from Buckeye Talk. Go walk through Buckeye Grove. I was walking through it the other day. You can tell they're adding some plaques. They don't have the 21 or 22 All-Americans in there yet. But if you've never been to Buckeye Grove, go walk through that. Go walk around campus. It's a lovely spring day. We endorse the spring game. If you've never gone, and you don't have anything going on Saturday and you're within 2 hours of Columbus, I would say go to the spring game. That's all I would say. I'm not here. It's the only Ohio State thing I will ever endorse because it's cheap. And I don't feel like I'm asking you to, have to take out a second mortgage to go to a football game, which unfortunately, and most other things that happen in the sports and entertainment world these days, sometimes it feels like you have to take out a second mortgage. This is a chance to not have to do that. Okay, we are going to get into some of the visitors from a recruiting standpoint on Saturday. We're going to get into where Ohio State is with this run of six commits in the last 3 weeks, how Ryan Day's feeling about it, and some movement in NIL and Ohio State collectives that I think is affecting how Ohio State feels about recruiting. That's the main part of this pod. But little housekeeping early on, because I sent us a survey to tech subscribers. If you'd like to be a tech subscriber, you can get information about the spring game. Boom, 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 boom. Stuff flowing in your phone on Saturday. You could keep it for a day and then quit. You type stop and you're out. 614-350-3315. If you want to be a tech subscriber, send a text to that number. You get back a link to sign up. 2-week free trial. Monday pod was Haskins, Heisman Hill, Haskins Hill, whatever we call it. My proposal to create a world where instead of Buckeye Grove, where you plant a tree and get a plaque for the Ohio State legends, I think I counted 155 plaques in there. A little addendum, not just first-team All-Americans, but also by how you finish in the Heisman Trophy race could get some guys in who I think deserve to be in there that aren't there right now. Dwayne Haskins, C.J. Stroud, Justin Fields, Braxton Miller, J.T. Barrett, first and foremost. So, guys, a question that I asked was, my Heisman Hill, Ryan Day was on the pod talking about Dwayne Haskins, the 1-year anniversary of his passing. Go listen to the Monday pod. My idea to either let in top 5 Heisman finishers, top 10 Heisman finishers, which adds 4 more guys to the list beyond those 5 I mentioned, or keep it as it is. I sent out the texter survey, but I want to get what you guys are. Steven, what would you do? Would you keep it as it is, first team All-Americans only, or would you expand it to top 5 Heisman or top 10 Heisman?
I'd vote top 5 because that's the closest to what I would actually choose. I think it should just be if you get to go to New York, then you should get there, but so I'll go with top 5.
I'm definitely against that because that's letting someone else be in charge of that because I don't trust, the Heisman varies who gets to come to New York.
Wasn't it always 4 now? Yeah, it's always 4 now.
Okay, but we're going backwards. So like JT Barrett didn't get to go, right?
Right.
Dwayne Haskins got to go, but JT Barrett didn't get to go. So, and Braxton Miller didn't get to go because they both finished fifth, whatever.
Right.
So like you have to think about. I don't want to leave it up to like where their dividing line is on whether you're close enough as a fifth place finisher. So I want it concrete. So you're closest to top 5 as opposed to expanding all top 10 or keeping it as it is. Nathan, what would you do?
I mean, my initial lean is top 5. Did you have numbers on how many, if it was top 5, how many it would add? Top 10, how many it would add?
If it's top 5, it adds the 5 guys I mentioned.
Okay.
It just happens to be the great modern quarterbacks who weren't first-team All-Americans. Miller, Barrett, Haskins, Fields, Stroud.
Right.
If it's top 10, then you also bring in Joe Germain, Bobby Hoying, Tom Matty from the 1960 team, who became famous for being a backup quarterback for Johnny Unitas in an NFL championship game, right? And Zeke, which is like the one that it's like, oh, now it adds Zeke because he finished 8th in 2015. So it's either you add it right now, it would be 5 you would add, or if you go to top 10, it would be 9 that you would add. And because there have been 32 total Buckeyes ever, more circumstances, but 32 individual players who have finished in the top 10 of the Heisman voting, but 23 of them are already in. So that's why it's 9 or 5. But then again, we would apply it going forward as well.
Yeah, I guess I don't have necessarily a problem with 10, but going forward, the award has changed. And so going forward, being in the top 10 of the Heisman voting might mean you're like the 7th or 8th best quarterback in the country, honestly, for that given year. So that's where it starts to get a little bit. I know it's the most important position in sports, but that starts to maybe stretch it a little far for me. And if Zeke is the only guy that really seems like he's caught in the middle where it would be almost a travesty that he's not there, I would still maybe just defer to 5, and you're just not going to get everybody that you want in.
But neither of you guys are staunchly on don't mess with it. Keep it as is. You're both open to the idea.
I think this is a good idea, and it's an overdue idea, especially as it relates to quarterbacks. And because at the time when people were setting up things like both this and the College Football Hall of Fame, where you also had to be, I believe, a first-team All-American to be eligible for that.
Yeah,
you're leaving out like how many times there could be a great 2 or even 3 like great quarterback, like undeniably great quarterbacks who just happen to be playing at the same time. They can't all be first team All-Americans, and that's the one position that's true of. I suppose it's true of specialists, but the main positions, it's the one position that's true of. So I think it's an overdue idea, both locally and nationally, to expand it at least a little bit, because you want to keep exclusivity. You want it to really mean something. But I think the adjustment has to be made primarily for the quarterbacks.
Quarterback is just too important of a position for it to feel like only one person gets to like be the face of the position every single year. You know what I'm saying? There's too many good quarterbacks in a given year, and All-American lists are all, to an extent, in whatever sport you're talking about, are supposed to tell the story of the season. And because there's only one first-team All-American quarterback, that's supposed to be the only story. Joe Burrow was a really good quarterback. Well, so was Justin Fields, and so was Trevor Lawrence, and so was Jalen Hurts, even if Joe Burrow is the first name that comes out of your mouth. So I love this idea. I think we have to find other ways to continue to emphasize how important quarterback is, just among sports when we're talking about positions.
And even just, Nathan, I know you just like threw in specialists. Noah Ruggles has a tree. CJ Stroud and Justin Fields don't. So like that's part of like, and it's one of those things. And I'm not out to diminish anybody who earned a tree in Buckeye Grove, because sometimes like in the Baseball Hall of Fame, it's like, well, that guy's in, let this guy in. It's like, well, you can't just go through and find like the quote least deserving person to earn an honor and then make that, well, then there's 50 other people that should be in. So like, I'm not trying to do that. I'm not trying to get rid of Noah Ruggles' tree. It's just like, well, come on, like CJ Stroud, Justin Fields. Like, so most people were open to this, and I was pretty happy about this. 72% said top 5. So they're with you guys. 17% said top 10. And that means only 11% said keep it as is, only first team All-American. So people very open to this idea. Maybe we can try to make a little push here and see if Ohio State might actually do it. Second thing that we talked about on a podcast earlier this week, the chances of Ohio State having a mini dynasty in the future. So the first, I asked two questions about this. One was, do you think Ohio State's chances at a mini dynasty get better or worse with an expanded playoff, with a 12-team playoff? So they get worse. The 12-team playoff means Ohio State has to win 3 or 4 playoff games for a title, so the chances go down. Or they get better. A 12-team playoff means it's easier for Ohio State to get in, so chances go up. Nathan, what do you think the texters voted for there?
I think they probably voted that the dynasty chances go up because they have seen too many times where Ohio State had national championship worthy teams that were or national championship potential teams that are 5th, 6th, whatever, just left out of even having a chance to win it.
Stephen, what do you say? Do you think they go up or they go down?
Yeah, up.
Yeah. You guys are right. 68% said the chances go up of a mini dynasty, 32% said they go down. So then specifically, what do you think are the chances of Ohio State having a mini dynasty, which by our shorthand definition is multiple titles in a short period of time, in the next decade? So here were the choices. I think it's a very good chance. I think it will happen. Good, it could happen, but it'll be difficult. Difficult, lots of competition and expanded playoff means winning more games. Or impossible, it's not going to happen. One title is enough to think about. Stephen, what do you think won? Chances of a mini dynasty in the next decade. Very good, good, difficult, impossible.
Good. I think difficult second, though.
Nathan, what do you think?
I think difficult is the answer for some of the reasons I laid out on that podcast, but there might have been enough optimism that good won.
Yeah, so this is one of those surveys that turned out to tell us nothing because it's basically right down the middle. Difficult won with 45%, but good got 43%. So the two middle answers are basically the same and account for 88% of the answers. And then on the extremes, very good, I think it will happen, got 6. Impossible, not going to happen, got 5. So everybody's in the middle, and the same amount of people are on the two ends. So it's like, hard, but I don't. So I don't know. I thought it was an interesting discussion. I'm not sure there are interesting conclusions to draw. So we wanted to run for that. And the last thing before we get into our recruiting discussion is the Friday College Football Survivor Show that Shahan Jeharaja and I just recorded. We did trades in college football for college football playoff contenders. If you could make some deals, like the transfer portal gets you thinking this way, but it's not just like guys leaving. It's not just free agency. It's like, let's make some deals. And Shahan and I each came up with 3 trades nationally. We didn't know what each other was going to do. And we both wound up making trades for Ohio State to get offensive tackles. So if you want to listen to that, if only. Think about it. If you could do this, what would you be willing to give up from Ohio State's current roster to trade for some more established dudes at offensive tackle? You can go listen to the College Football Survivor Show wherever you get Buckeye Talk if you want to hear that podcast this week. Saturday. It's on Big Ten Network, I think, right? So people can watch it. Mm-hmm. And then we'll be texting during it. We will be writing right after the game. We'll have some thoughts up, and then we'll go to interviews and have even more thoughts up. And then we will get up a post-game podcast sometime on Saturday, reacting to what we saw in the Ohio State spring game. Go back and listen to the Thursday pod where Nathan and Steven drafted 2 full teams, 44 Buckeyes overall drafted. Give you a sense of where we think this roster is right now. But let's get into what we think the roster will be like in the future with some recruiting discussion next on Buckeye Talk. Doug, Nathan, and Steven back. All right, Steven, you did a recruiting pod like 9 days ago now where you talked about a lot of recruiting topics, but the momentum for this Ohio State recruiting class has continued to grow even since then. I think it's 6 commits in the last 3 weeks at this point. Mm-hmm. They are up, I think, to the number 2 overall class in the 247 composite ratings. Is that correct?
That's correct. Right behind Georgia.
Right behind Georgia. And when we talked to Ryan Day on Wednesday, you asked Ryan Day a question about recruiting momentum. Do you think that recruiting momentum is actually happening at Ohio State right now? And what did you think of Ryan Day's answer to your question?
I do think so. And I was actually pretty impressed by his answer. I didn't think he would go down that road a little bit, but I thought he would maybe downplay it a little bit, but he didn't. He just kind of he just leaned into it completely. And a lot of people in the program are right now. It's the fact that right now they're getting commits that felt like they were going to pop sooner than later anyway. But it feels like those guys finally popping and making things public is getting the attention of some of the national guys that they're in on, some of which will be here this weekend. We can get into that list as we continue this pod here, but some of which will be taking official visits this summer. But what we've seen is Ohio State usually goes on runs with commits. That's been the kind of the standard of how they go about building their classes since Ryan Day has taken over. And usually what happens is when teams go on runs, other players who are maybe not as close to making a decision, they start to pop up and go, maybe I should go there. Maybe I should go there. And what it does is it creates this world of endless possibilities for what a class might be. I think we saw that at its peak in 21, where they were going on all that run of commitments while we were all stuck in the house during COVID. And it reached a point where we're all going, could this be the highest rated recruiting class of all time? And obviously it didn't finish that way, but that's the type of momentum you can create in situations like this. The question is, can you turn that momentum into something that's actually substantial and not just something that has people's attention on social media right now?
So I also asked a question, and we want to tie recruiting and NIL together here. We'll get to NIL in the second part because recruiting is more exciting. Ryan Day gave a quote about Ohio State's recruiting right now that I think might have been the most important quote of the spring. And we'll get to that in a second, because the issue that I really want to get to here is where we think Ohio State was on signing day in December for the class of 2023 and where we think they are now with the class of 2024. 10 recruits in. They have the number 2 overall class rating on the 247 sports composite. And they have the number 2 individual rating per player, both behind Georgia. And I think there are 2 commits that have happened since, Stephen, you did the recruiting pod last week. And I think the 2 of them are illustrative of what's happening right now. And one is quarterback Aaron Noland committing, and one is linebacker Peyton Pierce committing. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about the quarterback first, Nathan, because quarterbacks are what recruiting is really all about. This was a dude who's not Dylan Raiola. So I think anything you say, this is not anything about Aaron Noland, but when you have at one point the number 1 quarterback, the number 1 player in the class of 2024 committed to you and he decommits, that shadow remains over the entire class until you get to signing day. Because once upon a time, we thought this. It's not just a miss. It's not that you didn't get him. It's that you had him and you lost him. And whether there is great blame to be assigned there, whether it is just how recruiting works, whether it is a kid who just popped a little early. As it stands now, the Dylan Raiola momentum is USC, Georgia, or Nebraska, which are all like 3 primary examples of, okay, one's the 2-time defending national champ that Ohio State's going to have to go through. And if they get a quarterback like Dylan Raiola, oh my God, they won with Stetson Bennett. Okay, that'd be a big deal. One is USC, it's Lincoln Riley. Okay, well, we made a big deal. I thought it was like, oh my God, Ryan Day beat Dylan Raiola for Lincoln Riley. Boom, shakalaka, Ryan. And now, Lincoln Riley might get him. And the other is, holy moly, he has family connections to Nebraska. All of a sudden, we're going to have like a team in the Big Ten that's been dormant, that's going to get the number 1 quarterback recruit in the country. That has a chance to change the face of the Big Ten. But Ohio State got Aaron Noland, Nathan. And when we think about losing Raiola to come back with this guy, who is one of the top, 5 recruits, 5 quarter. He's number 8 quarterback, number 71 player, according to 247. I don't want to only treat Aaron Noland for the rest of his Ohio State career as like, the rebound guy. Dylan Raiola broke up with him, and this is because this might be a long, beautiful relationship. What do we think about Ohio State landing here with this quarterback?
Well, I don't think you have to look at him as the rebound guy. That's going to depend on the results a little bit. I mean, it's playing out with the current Ohio State quarterback situation too. You have to remember, like, Quinn Ewers isn't here anymore. He was the number one recruit in that class, and he left. And now, whatever happens between Kyle McCord and Devin Brown and the results that they produce will be compared unfavorably if Quinn Ewers is, first of all, wins that job, which isn't, I don't think, a given, but then leads Texas to glory or back to the playoff where Ohio State can't get or something. And I think that's what's going to determine this. The recruiting rankings are what they are. And obviously it was a big deal when they got Raiola. It's a big deal when they couldn't hold on to that commitment. But, CJ Stroud wasn't the number one quarterback prospect in his class. Kyle McCord and Devin Brown were not the number one quarterbacks in their class. I don't think we think that just because they don't have that guy means they can't win a national championship. But the comparison will be there if he doesn't play up to the standard, the Ohio State standard, more so than chasing that individual player.
So as we're coming down the stretch here, Stephen, right? Again, in the NIL world, felt like Ohio State had done good work with this kid, but perhaps as a recruit out of Georgia, perhaps there was going to be something that happened late. And if it had happened and everybody was waiting for Aaron Nolan's commitment, what was it, Friday night?
Yeah.
A week ago, Friday night, right?
Yeah, Saturday night. Yeah.
Saturday night, a week ago, Saturday night. Oh, no, I think Ohio State has a good chance. And he gets up there and says something other than Ohio State, given the perception and the speculation around his recruitment. We'd be on this podcast like flipping out the idea of, I don't know if Ohio State can compete for the elite national kids in the NIL world, would have been reinforced. Instead, does it feel like it's been pushed back on by Ohio State, however it happened, whether it's with culture and brotherhood and the offensive system, or whether it's with them getting some NIL stuff done themselves. And I don't know which one it is. All I know is Aaron Nolan committed to Ohio State, right? We have to think about what happened in terms of how we would react if it had gone the other way. Wouldn't we be freaking out?
We would, 100%. Because in December, it was very clear coming out of that signing day, Ohio State has a problem. How are they going to handle this problem? How are they going to fix it? And 4 months into it, we're sitting here again. You ask questions about it. It looks like they fixed the problem. Now, is it like fixed forever? Probably not, because NIL is still new and there's a lot of moving parts with that stuff. But it feels like they've got it back under control in a way that when we get to December, I don't know if there's going to be this long list of top 100 recruits and 5-stars where if someone goes, well, why didn't they get that kid? Why'd they finish second? We're just going to be going, NIL, I don't know what you want them to do about it.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't declare victory yet, because last year a lot of the consternation built going into signing day. And some of the things that were, I think, the biggest influences were teams coming in at the end. Like they needed to flip a guy, they needed to seal a guy, and that's where some of that influence was coming in. So Ohio State needs to, I think, has its eyes open to some things and is making some corrections, but November, December are still going to be big months. That's where the proof will be in the pudding, the whatever pudding it is that we eat in November and December.
Money pudding. You eat money pudding. It's made
money pudding.
It's gold. Diamond pudding. Because they lost Mark Fletcher, and Mark Fletcher flipped the running back to Miami, and who was the cornerback that flipped to Auburn?
Kindly.
Kindly. So you lost two guys on that flip.
Yeah, and he's actually had a pretty good spring.
Out, by the way.
If Aaron Nolan flips in November, yeah.
So, but as it stands, right, because, I mean, you just look at this stuff. 8 of the top 10 quarterbacks in the class of 2024, according to 247, 7 of the top 10. 7 of the top 10 are committed. Number 2 quarterback, Julian Sand, he's committed to Alabama. DJ Lagway to Florida. Jaden Davis to Michigan, which we know was a big deal when it happened. CJ Carr, Lloyd Carr's grandson, did not pick Michigan. Picked Notre Dame, which opened the door for Jaden Davis to go to Michigan. Jake Merklinger, Tennessee. Aaron Nolan to Ohio State. Walker White to Auburn. Ryan Puglisi to Georgia. Elijah Brown out of California is still there. He's the number 7 quarterback. Oh, no, it is only 2 of the top 10. And then Dylan Raiola, still on the board. 247 Sports has him 44% to Georgia, 33% to Nebraska. I'm going to guess the other 33% must be USC. So that's where that stands. We've talked about this a lot, Steven, the idea of like when in the cycle do you want to get a quarterback commit? It feels like they've done pretty well with the late guys. There have been some early guys that like they went so early, kind of the guy changed by the time he got here, Jack Miller, or the guy never got here, Dylan Raiola. This timing on Aaron Noland, right? Like April, when he's going to sign in December, is this a good time to be locking in a quarterback? Hopefully for Ohio State, they think locking in a quarterback.
I don't hate it. I think it's better than 18 months. Clearly, that's only worked one time, and I think it still gives you what you want your quarterback to be in the class, and that's one of the leaders who helps peer recruit. Aaron Noland's got 6 months to help. Really, well, no, actually more like 8 months to help build the rest of this class around him. So some people, there's some people in the program who maybe wouldn't mind letting these kids go through their senior year and then maybe decide, I don't know if that you want to keep playing that game because eventually the CJ Stroud or Devin Brown's not going to be there, or the Lincoln Keyholes. But I do think this is a good window for you where you get him in the spring, you've got all summer and fall for him to help build the class around him. Yeah, I like this. For me, I like this.
Ohio State right now has 5 of the top 100 players in the class, according to 247 Composite, committed for 2024. In the 2023 class, they only signed 4 top 100 players. So there's already some progress here. But the other guy that I want to talk about is not a top 100 player. He's number 154, the number 15 linebacker out of Texas. It's Peyton Pierce. But Nathan, I like a defensive guy, like a national defensive guy, and the fingerprints of James Laurinaitis are all over this thing. This feels like a signal, maybe, that this was not just like, oh, no, they got a good player, that's cool. They got a Texas linebacker soon after James Laurinaitis came to Ohio State. What do we think of Peyton Pierce?
Probably not coincidental. I think it is more, like you're saying, a signal than like an announcement, if that makes sense. Because I think we just had the Dudes podcast, and we're specifically talking about dudes on defense. And you tend to find those guys higher, like the guys who are like surefire dudes. Like 150 is a good contender. I don't know if you assume he's going to be a dude. People can go back and listen to that podcast if they missed it to kind of get the gist of what we're talking about there. But I think it's important to start making those inroads in other places, because let's look at it. Like, why has Ohio State done some of the things it has done on offense and unquestionably had just an assembly line of dudes coming in there? It's because they can go to states like Texas and get players like this, and they haven't been doing that as consistently on defense. And I think it's shown up on the field. So I think it's definitely a step in the right direction. I'm more curious about when we look back 2, 3, 4 months down the line and say, oh, they got this guy, and this Pierce was maybe an indication that sort of signing, that sort of commitment was possible.
Yeah, I don't think it's the player himself, what he'll do for the roster necessarily. I don't think it's that Peyton Pierce will lead to somebody else necessarily, but it's that, although he has like a guy in Texas, an edge rusher, right, that he wants to get here. But it's the first sign of, okay, maybe they can do this. Because there's 10 guys in right now, Steven, right? Mm-hmm. 8 offense, 2 defense, and the other defensive player is Cade Stover's cousin, who could walk from his house to Ohio Stadium if he wanted to. So congratulations on getting a Columbus area Stover. But, when you're the Ohio State coach who can't get a Columbus area Stover, like, we're going to wonder if you should have your job or not. And then everybody else is like skill guys. Well, they kind of do that. They've got receivers. They got a quarterback. They got James Peoples, the running back. There's a good Indiana lineman. And then there's 3 lower rated Ohio offensive linemen. So everything else in this class, Steven, even though there's momentum, is kind of stuff they've done. Like, this is what they do. Well, they went and got some lower-rated dudes, the Armstrong Twins. They're all excited to be Buckeyes. Awesome. Get Cleveland kids on the offensive line. They want to be leaders in the class. Great. Go get them. Oh, Brian Hartline got receivers. Well, what do you think? Oh, Tony Alford had his hit his big national recruiting, we've seen that before. But this, like Peyton Pierce, get 4 more Peyton Pierce type recruits, which is just top 150 national defensive players whose grandparents didn't go to Ohio State, right? Give me a Tim Walton guy like this. Give me a Perry Aliano guy like this. Give me a Larry Johnson guy like this. Maybe give me one more linebacker like this, whatever. But we need proof that this could happen, Steven, and especially in the linebacker room, because Tackett Curtis is at USC right now, by the way.
Yeah.
Right? This is their version of that. Jim Knowles lived in Louisiana trying to get Tackett Curtis, and he didn't get him. They got this version of it, Steven. Are we making what would on the recruiting seismometer? How much of a recruiting earthquake is it for them to get the number 154 player who's a Texas linebacker and what it means for that side of the ball?
I think it's the most important commitment they have so far because everything else is what Ohio State's been under Ryan Day. You get good quarterbacks, you get good receivers, you get the in-state offensive lineman. Tony Alford gets a really good running back every 4 years. Okay. This is, especially because of that position where the linebacker recruiting has been good. I don't want to make it seem like the linebacker recruiting has been bad, but it's been expected. CJ Hicks lives an hour and a half from you. Gabe Powers lives 45 minutes from you. Tommy Eichenberg's from Cleveland. Reed Carrico is like 90 minutes from you. They've had one national recruit at linebacker since Ryan Day took over, and that was Cody Simon. Shout out to Jeff Hafley, New Jersey area. Mitchell Melton and Court Williams were listed at that 247, but Court Williams was coming here to play bullet / defensive back / safety, whatever you want to call the position. And Mitchell Melton, this was always on the table for him to eventually end up in the defensive line room. Having the jack position just gives him a defined role, but that was always on the table. And I'll give you a half point for Still Chambers because they talked about linebacker when they recruited him. Even Cade Stover, that's a Ohio Stover. So they have not done the national recruiting at linebacker. So for you to get that guy, for that to be the first national defensive guy you get in this class, a lot of that is kudos to James Laurinaitis because he got offered in January when James Laurinaitis showed up here from Notre Dame, and all that momentum from Notre Dame came to Columbus, so kudos to him. But for that to be the first national defensive recruit you get, that means a lot. And now it's like, okay, what else can you get in this class? Because you just kind of set a tone here by getting Peyton Pierce.
Tackett Curtis last year was number 108 overall player, the number 9 linebacker. Jim Knowles spent so much time in Louisiana, but they named a sandwich after him at the deli near Tackett Curtis's house. They named him for other coaches too, but right, that was a LSU, USC, Ohio State thing, and he didn't stay home. He didn't stay home. Yeah. I think it's more forgiving when you're the out-of-state school and you lose to the hometown school, and it's like, I want my parents to be able to drive to my games. It's like, okay, because that's what you sell the Ohio kids.
He went further.
So it's not like people are not telling Kirby Smart, like, how dare you didn't get CJ Hicks. It's like he wanted to go to Ohio State. So if Tackett Curtis went to LSU, it's like, okay, he went to USC. And Jim Knowles was living there. So it's not we're not going to fire Jim Knowles because he didn't get Tackett Curtis, but that was like a big loss. You lost. You spent a lot of time. You really wanted him. And he picked a school farther away than Ohio State from his house. So why didn't you get him? And whether it's NIL or whether it's anything else that goes into recruiting, it was a loss. And this is close enough that I think, like Nathan, it's okay. Last year they tried and it didn't work. And this year they tried and it did work. And what changed? Well, they added James Laurinaitis. They seem to have gotten their NIL in order. Maybe it's year 2 of the Jim Knowles defense, right? It wasn't a perfect defense, but it was improved. Again, you can't take it in just like, well, they got, it's up to a kid. You can't go by individual 17 and 18-year-olds and make sweeping conclusions, except I am. This is proof that it's fixed. But no, but Nathan, right? It's an obvious contrast, and it's a loss and a win.
It's evidence that it could be fixed. It's not proof that it's fixed. You know what I mean? Like,
well
you
said.
have to accumulate evidence, and then you have proof. And I think this is a piece of evidence, and we'll see how much evidence they collect and turn it into proof.
So I think they're feeling good, Stephen, right? Like right now, and I want to get when we get to the NIL stuff, I want to get deeper into this. Ryan Day emphasized again on Wednesday, hey, they signed a really good class. I think by average star rating, it was 2 or 3. It just was a little bit smaller in December. But we also could list, here's 5 national guys they were in on and may have finished second for, and NIL had something to do with it. And by the way, here's 2 flips. So he's going to be very careful of making sure he doesn't say like, yeah, we were really disappointed with the recruiting class, because then Calvin Simpson Hunt is going to be like, what? And Carnell Tate's going to be like, what do you mean? So like, he's not going to say that. But it wasn't as good as it could have been. And I think they felt that. Do you think Ohio State's staff feels better right now about how recruiting's going?
Yes. They've changed some things in their initial approaches, especially with in-state guys, maybe not holding off so long, which is how you end up with the Armstrong Twins and Mark Nave in the class as early as they are right now. Maybe you wouldn't have seen that till the summer after they camped, like we saw with Jermaine Matthews not getting his offer until he camped. But changing some approaches so that, because some of this is optics, right? If you spend a year and a half on a kid from Georgia, defensive lineman, and it doesn't pay off with a commitment, we're going to go, what are you doing? Why didn't you win that? If you spend 4 months on that kid because you also put your resources elsewhere to make sure that you didn't have to come around the back end and try to flip a kid later on, it looks a little better because the plan was executed better. So that standpoint, yeah, they feel better. But also they've done some things where it doesn't feel like they're fighting with one hand tied behind their back as much. Now, does that mean you're going to win every fight? No, but it does mean that you can put up your best effort. And it didn't always feel like last cycle they were able to put up their best effort. And you shouldn't be in that position as one of the top 3 or 4 programs in the country.
It does feel like with the Armstrongs and with Nave that this is a little bit, they're backing up what Ryan Day had talked about in conjunction with NIL, which is we might just have to turn inward a little bit more and really focus on some of these in-state kids where it's not going to be NIL as much in the recruitment because they want to be Buckeyes. That's what's important to them. And the proof, like, all right, they're making the offers and taking the commitments earlier, Stephen, as you said. And I think that's some proof in the pudding. You look at the 247 top players in Ohio right now. Bryce West and Aaron Scott are listed as the top 2 players in Ohio. They visited Ohio State. Ohio State really likes him. They're both secondary guys. It feels like they're in good shape with them. Jordan Marshall, the running back, picked Michigan. That felt like a very big deal in the moment. Then Ohio State gets James Peoples, and it's like, okay, maybe some things even out. Garrett Stover is 5. Deontay Armstrong is 9. Devontae Armstrong is 11. And Mark Nave is 18. So, by the way, though, also there are 1, 2, 3, 4 Michigan commits from the state of Ohio among the top 20 kids in Ohio, which is like another thing. So it's really, maybe that's part of it too. All right, if Michigan's making more of a, Michigan's doing everything better right now. Let's make sure we don't crack the door for Mark Nave to be a Wolverine. Let's not make sure we don't crack the door for the Armstrongs to be a Wolverine. We're going to get them in. What's the, all right, no.
Yes and no. Jordan Marshall is like the Michigan one where it's like Michigan's doing everything better, so they got Jordan Marshall. I don't want to put the other ones are not necessarily that. Those are guys where Ohio State also evaluated them for a long time and decided to go in different directions.
But I'm not saying those linemen can't be good players, but we're not having really tough discussions about this team this spring saying where are all the Ohio in-state guys ranked 300, 400, 500 that could help this offensive line. Like, they've got those guys. So those are nice parts of your recruiting class, but those aren't the guys, even Nathan Baird, who is the guy who is the
stars matter. Nathan Baird.
Even he will have to sit here and say those guys can help you win a national championship.
What
they don't
is
tend
happening?
To lead you. They don't tend to lead you to a national championship.
We have Steven drafting offensive linemen ahead of receivers, and we have Nathan Baird proclaiming that stars matter and where are your 5-star recruits, and the world is upside down. So, again, to your point, though, we're talking about Josh Fryer and Jacob James and Trey LaRue and some of these lower-rated Ohio and Midwest guys that when Ohio State got them in that class, we're kind of like, okay, I don't know. And now here we are, and it's like, okay, well, I don't know. And, like, that's That's a direct linkage. That was their recruiting then, and right now we're wondering if they have good enough offensive linemen. So point taken, Nathan, but it might only be perception. And it might be, for real, it might be 100% perception. But perception, to me, it's taking from strength or taking from weakness. Are you offering and taking these guys early because regardless of the ranking, you like them? And, hey, we need depth, and let's make sure we establish Ohio relationships and we don't give these guys opportunities to commit to Kentucky or Michigan State or Michigan, and then we've got to try to flip them and we're not showing them love? Or are you going out and missing on 5 national offensive linemen and then coming back and being like, well, I guess we'll take this Ohio kid in the 500s? Is it honestly, Stephen, is it just timing and perception, and that's it? But does that matter then? Does timing and perception matter or no?
I think it matters a little bit because of how Ohio State sends out its offers. Sometimes offering a kid early can maybe give it the quote unquote Buckeye bump. I mean, it's the Mayan Williams case, right? What if Mayan Williams would have just already been committed in like January and never committed to Iowa State? How it doesn't change the fact that you lost Bijan Robinson in that class, but you're not as chastisey with. I don't even know if chastisey is a word, but it will be right now. Okay, well, it's going to be right now. Thank you, Nathan. It's going to be a word right now. We're not jumping down Tony Alford's back the same way as we have been in terms of like, oh, you lost this dude, so this is like your backup plan, and hopefully it works. Because it doesn't feel as backup planny when you get him this early. So then you look at it more as a, that guy's really lower rated. What do you like about that guy?
I also wonder if there can be any real effect, though, because if Justin Fry knows he's got these 3 guys in the house, and it's time for Justin Fry to go win a national recruit, because he got the 3 Ohio linemen last year.
Yeah.
Saraveld, Padilla, and Montgomery. And he has 3 Ohio offensive linemen this year. Go win somebody. But if he knows he has these 3 in his pocket and he's not trying to recruit 3 national offensive linemen because he's trying to do a whole class of linemen, can he pick a single national offensive lineman and go live in his garage? Knowing that I have the Armstrongs and Nave ready to go? Is it the Greg Studrawa could live with Wyatt Davis because Josh Myers said I'm good? Like, is there any actual application here that actually enhances their chances? Enhance the chance. That's got to be, someone's used that as a slogan. Enhance the chance. Enhance the chance because Justin Fry's not saying I have 0 offensive linemen right now. I have to go to Georgia, Louisiana, Tennessee, and Texas. He's saying I have 3 offensive linemen, so I'm picking this kid in Tennessee, and who's the number 46 player in the country, and I'm going to go be his best friend. Is that real, Stephen?
I mean, it actually might be because, the top guy is also from California in the cycle, Brendan Baker. So he's not at Bosco, though. He's at Mater Dei, but concept is the same. Yes, it helps because the Armstrong Twins and Mark Nave, and even Ian Moore, I'm throwing him in this as well. They're not – we don't need to worry about them. Like, the Armstrong Twins are going to be here every weekend because they have nothing better to do than to be here every weekend and helping to build this class. And they're vocal, and it helps in that way. So because – he is not going to be in a position where he's stressing out about, oh, I struck out on all these national guys. I got to make sure I get these Ohio guys, but I haven't been showing them love for a year, so maybe they're not interested in coming anymore. They're in. Leave us alone. We'll be here when you need us, but go get Brandon Baker. Go get Jordan Seaton. Go get all these top national guys. We're going to be here no matter what. So it does it helps in terms of when you're trying to balance time throughout the week of who you should be spending time with. If your Ohio guys are telling you to leave them alone, they got this, you don't have to worry about us, that frees up, 4 extra hours a week that you could be spending literally anywhere else or on any phone call or any Zoom call talking to anybody.
And then it isn't just Justin Fry recruiting those linemen. It's the Armstrong Twins also recruiting those linemen, saying like, Justin Fry's the best and Ryan Day's the best. And you should see the stuff they've talked about with the training program and the strength program for offensive linemen. Like, you got to come here, man. So I don't know, Nathan. Like, I think you make a good point, Nathan, that when they got the guys in the 4 and the 500s a couple of years ago, we were like, stud, what's up? So we can't have a parade for the guys in the 300s and the 500s now. But if the timing's different and the approach is different, the one thing I like when there are issues and then things change in an attempt to address them. So if it feels like Ohio State did not recruit in the way it wanted to in the last cycle, and they say, okay, one of the things we're going to do is with all this NIL stuff, we're going to lean back into Ohio a little bit harder. And now here's proof of how and when, timing and players, which then can maybe create some opportunities elsewhere. We'll see if it works long term, Nathan. But I am willing in the NIL world to make more assumptions that, well, they're just going to have some guys who are lower rated because they just can't go, we're going to get 25 national guys and just compete at the highest level of NIL with 25 guys. Like, they probably can't. So they're going to strategically take some guys where they don't have to take that approach. They can take a you love the Buckeyes approach, develop, right? You get in a little bit earlier, develop relationships, maybe help starting to develop those players. Justin Fry sending them blocking drills, right? Whatever. You're getting them on a nutrition plan remotely. And it's just like, I feel good about the adjustment in the approach, even, Nathan, if they're kind of winding up with the same geographically and from a recruiting rating standpoint, the same type of player. It feels more assertive. It feels more planned. It feels more plan A than plan B. And it's the plan A of the NIL era, which maybe isn't the plan A of the Urban Meyer era. But I'd rather they create a new plan A than keep trying the old plan A and wind up with a bunch of plan Bs and Cs.
Well, but if your plan A only brings you the caliber of player that is here right now, where Ryan Day is coming out of the spring and has problems at least 2, if not 3 of his 5 starting offensive line spots, then you can't justify that. Like the plan A, this only works, and Steven's theory is a sound one, and we've espoused it before, that from a recruiting resources standpoint, there's a benefit to locking somebody up early. But you know when that worked really, really, really well? When they got Josh Myers. That's the guy that you lock down early, and he says, leave me alone. I'm going to go be like borderline All-America caliber second round NFL draft pick. Now go get somebody else. That's when it works really well. It doesn't work as well when you're getting guys who may or may not actually ever be starters for you. So I get the idea of laying this foundation, but what are you building on it? That's what's going to matter. And the other thing, I mean, none of this also changes the fact that I think they're probably going to have to not only look at the portal this spring, they probably have to look in the portal at the end of next season. At the end of back this December, January, I think they're going to have to still be pretty active in the portal to find more offensive line help at the end of this coming season.
Well, if Ian Moore's not from Ohio, but he's from Indiana, which is a state over, so that's your Josh Myers to completely like compare it, because he's a top 100 recruit who actually has been committed for like 6 months now and is just as vocal as the Armstrong Twins now. It's just he doesn't actually live in Ohio, but also there's not a top 100 offensive lineman in Ohio this cycle. So that's probably the closest thing to that.
So I think where this has to come in is if doing this allows you to go win the next Zach Rice recruiting battle, right? That you can have some proof of. Josh Myers is a good player, but the reason we're telling this story is because in some way it helped them get Wyatt Davis. So the idea that, well, Josh Myers is a better recruit than the guys we're talking about now. True. But the thing that really matters is now go have proof of, by taking Ohio guys early that you didn't have to babysit, there was a payoff for it. And we don't have that payoff right now. So if there is a payoff, Nathan, then I would say, okay, then to me, this is the new way of it working, right? That you do what you got to do and then show me. Because, right, if they just had one more, when we were doing the first 2023 team thing and we were saying, all right, who's a left tackle in 2023? We were saying recruit who's not here yet. And then they never got him.
Never came.
So the point, I think the main point where we all would agree, Nathan, is that's the problem. It wasn't necessarily that they wound up with 4 lower-rated offensive line recruits from the Midwest in the class of 2020. It was that then on top of that, they never, after Paris, went and got the guy in the next 2 classes that right now, that's who the left tackle should be. The number 1 recruit on the offensive line in either their class of 21 or the class of 2022. But, like, that guy doesn't exist at tackle. And so here we are. So if doing what they're doing now allows them to do that, which they have not done, then I think it's a success. But Nathan, your point of, well, don't have a parade for lower rated local guys, I think is true. And then now we can debate whether we think it will, enhance the chances of them succeeding there, but all that matters is if it does, Nathan. But do you agree? Would you potentially agree, Nathan, that maybe it will enhance, or it should enhance the possibility of Justin Fry going and winning somebody nationally?
I don't think I am there. No, I think that it's a separate relationship that he has to go develop and win that decision. And I don't.
But you don't think spending more time? You don't think spending more time because he doesn't have to worry about these other 3 guys? He has 4 guys committed already in this offensive line.
What do you mean? You don't worry about these other 3? Like, you don't think that's maybe the thing that I'm not convinced of, that they couldn't get replacements of this caliber of player later if they were still just spending this attention now.
But I think it's that they'd be spreading that. They don't have guys locked down, so he's trying to recruit 4 more spots on the offensive line because you're trying to go national maybe on a bunch of guys and failing at all of them and then backing into local guys. Now, if you take local guys first and then focus your national attention, doesn't maybe enhance your chances of hitting one national home run?
I guess what I'm saying is that under normal circumstances, I guess that makes sense. But things are at a critical point with this offensive line and the future of this offensive line even. And I think that this might have been the cycle where I wouldn't have cared so much about depth and I would have put all my resources up front into even taking less offensive line, but making sure you're getting the difference-making guys. So I don't discount what you're saying, but that's how it has to happen. Like, it has to be that they go get somebody else. I mean, when this program can go get wide receivers from anywhere in the country, and it can get quarterbacks from anywhere in the country, and it can get running backs from Virginia and North Carolina that are ranked in the top 100. And why is offensive line the one place on this offense? You can go get Jelani Thurman from Georgia. Like, why is offensive line the one place on this offense where there's this drought? That's the only thing that I think has to be answered here. I don't care that much about low-ranked in-state guys. It's not what's going to be how much are we going to be talking about any of these players 3 or 4 years down the line?
It's complete. It is complete. I cannot believe. Can we get the editor to clip that out? I don't care about low-ranked in-state guys. We have beaten the Purdue out of you.
Welcome home.
Once again,
welcome home.
No, once again, the point of what I was talking about in that circumstance doesn't even really relate to this. But you see my point, right? Like we judge Ohio State by the Ohio State standard, but we don't judge success at any other position by what we're talking about as being a good sign for this offensive line recruiting.
Yeah, I don't want to make it seem like I'm saying that this is a success so far. I am saying that I agree that they have put themselves in a position where they can maximize their chances of having a successful offensive line recruiting class. Now, they still have to go do it for sure, but you put yourself in the best position to do that, because I understand you should put as much resources as possible as getting these top national guys, but you also don't want to be Tony Alford 2020. You don't want to be Larry Johnson 2023, where you did that. You put all your resources into the top national guys in the country, and then you struck out. And as Larry Johnson found out last cycle, you end up with nothing when you do that. So you have to – it's got to be a mixture of both. You've got to have the depth, but also, yes, you have to put yourself in a position to spend as much time with these national recruits as possible. And for the offensive line, coming off of years and years of them not doing that, this is how you do it. You get the depth early, so you don't have to worry about it. So now you can go get the ones. You have your 2s and your 3s set for your future with those 3 lower-rated guys, and you have 1-1 with Ian Moore. Go get some more 1s to put with Ian Moore.
So, Steven, you mentioned Brandon Baker out of California, number 32 overall player, number 1 tackle in this class. And then am I saying it right? Gerby Lambert from Massachusetts, number 2 tackle, number 47 overall player. Mm-hmm. Are we at a point, like, does Justin Fry have to get one of those guys?
I think it goes a long way if Brandon Baker ends up a Buckeye, and that's a really big deal because especially he's from Mater Dei. Ohio State's been like chopping at Mater Dei for a while now. You remember Damani Jackson in the 2021 class, I believe, the cornerback who they thought for a while was going to come to Ohio State, but then ended up at USC. They've been flirting with Mater Dei, but they've never really been able to pierce it in a way that's actually led to something. That's a big deal. Brandon Baker's already been here this spring. There's a good chance he maybe comes back this summer for a visit as well. If Justin Fry pulls that off, this is a win of a cycle. because it's a tackle you need at a school that you've never had success at on the whole other side of the country.
And I will just throw in here quickly, maybe Mark Nave or the Armstrong Twins develop into All-Americans, right? We know that can happen. That's also part of this too. Pat Elflein was in the 800s and turned out to be a great player. So but we're talking about plans, and we're talking about relative standards, and we're talking about recruiting rankings because everybody does, because they're not the end all be all, but they are reflective. And so we're talking about the idea. It's not that those guys can't be valuable Buckeyes, but the standard is you have to get at every position some elite guys that everybody wants. And so that's the question. Non-Ohio guys, non-Midwest guys, they haven't been doing that on the offensive line. So that's what we're really talking about there. It's not doubting. Listen, it's one of these things. It's not doubting the offensive linemen in this class right now. However, the 2020 class, who are the fourth-year offensive linemen right now, when it was 4 guys on the offensive line, all Midwest, I think 3 Ohio guys and another Midwest guy, and we were all kind of like, I don't know. And the only guy in the mix right now is Josh Fryer. And the other 3 guys have just never been in the mix, Nathan, which shocks nobody. So we don't want to come on here and rip 18-year-olds for not being higher ranked recruits. It's not about the players. It's about the program. Those guys are good football players. It's like, oh, you're only the 500th best in the country at something. It's like, what are we talking about? None of us are the 5 millionth best at anything in the country. But it's the Ohio State standard, Nathan. And that class, Nathan's like, I might be one of the top 5 million sports writers. That class, it turned out to be right. This spring, every offensive tackle conversation we've had is the 2020 recruiting class coming home to roost. So that's the point, Nathan, of we saw it coming. They never did anything about it. And it is having an absolute effect on this team right now. So when you look at a recruiting class and say, well, it sort of seems like this, you're going to say, I don't know, man. Sure feels like it didn't work last time.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point about potential development. We've seen it before. Steven, when you're talking about the 2020 class, it wasn't that they got, nobody there. They did get Mayan Williams. So you really got to hit on your backup plan if the first plan doesn't work. So it does happen, not that he's All-America caliber, but that takes me back to when I was in my early days here at Buckeye Talk, when I said something about stars not mattering. It was a conversation about once they're here and we're talking about comparing guys, I don't care about the stars anymore. I care about what they've actually done. So it's a valid point, but everyone would have to admit that the guy, that's why we talk about the recruiting rankings, because the guys who have a smaller number next to their name tend to, more of those guys hit. So it's been so long. When you start comparing it again to the Ohio State standard, how the offensive line keeps coming up this short is kind of perplexing. Considering how you would think that, we talk about momentum, you would think that all the other good things that are happening with this offense, you get to come block for this quarterback and these receivers and these running backs, even though running back recruiting can bounce up and down. This is who you get to block for. Imagine what you can do. And for some reason that doesn't attract guys.
It is weird because I think they probably have the best recruiting pitch of any of the offensive spots right now, just because look at what you get to block for, but also there's nobody blocking you from getting on the field at all. By year 2, if you're a 5-star offensive tackle, it's very easy to say, yeah, you're probably our starter.
And just to recap it one more time, the 2020 Ohio State recruiting class, offensive line, Paris Johnson, number 9 player in the country, 3 years in the NFL draft. Luke Whippler, number 108 player in the country, 3 years in the NFL draft. The other 4 offensive linemen in that class, 463, 5'10", 852, and not rated. So the 2 guys who were superstars were so good, they were here and gone, and the other 4 guys are still here, and only one of them is in the mix to be a real factor.
But I would almost say, okay, but if you're telling me this class turns out to be that, you get 2 guys who are early entry NFL draft guys, one's going to go in the first round, one's going to be 3rd, 4th round, maybe. Okay, that I think counts as a win here. So, but they're not there yet.
which probably brings us back around to, okay, we see the lower rated guys in this. Show me your Paris and your Whippler, and then we'll be good to go. Show me your Whippler.
You know what's really the problem with this 2023 season? DeJuan Jones popped a year earlier than they expected him to. Like, what if he didn't pop until this past season? And so it's like, oh, now you get another year on that. It solves a lot of issues for you. But the fact that he popped in a way that he deserved to be a starter in 2021 very much moved up his timeline.
But the other way you would say that is that if he hadn't popped a year early, then they would have had tackle problems. I mean, it kind of spirals on itself. Like, he answered part of the deficiency by popping.
No. He popped in the year when they had 4 tackles.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying if he'd have just popped last year, like maybe they were expecting him to, he'd have probably been the starting right tackle while Paris would have been the left tackle. And then we're going, why don't we just move the 6'9", 400-pound freak athlete to left tackle and put Josh Pryor at right tackle?
Yeah, then you look in 2021, right? It's like tackles, J.C. Latham, they liked, right? Went to Bama. Tristan Lee, they liked, went to Clemson. Nolan Rucci, Wisconsin, came in and grabbed him early. Blake Fisher winds up at Notre Dame. And then they wind up with Zed Mahalski, who, might be a good player, but as a third-year player is not locking down a tackle spot right now. He's fighting because he was ranked in the 300s, and he was a Plan B guy. He was a Midwest Plan B guy when they missed on some other guys. Like hardcore tackle recruiting talk. Steven, who's going to be here on Saturday? Who are the most important recruits that will be in Ohio Stadium for the spring game? And are there any that could turn a spring game visit into a commitment in the somewhat near future?
Yeah, as far as to answer the second part of that question, because that's a very different question than who are the most important people here, with all due respect to everybody. But
yes,
in the words of the great Nathan Baird, stars matter.
Nathan Bairderman. We'll work that out.
So 2 guys I think people should continue to keep an eye on as you're maybe listening to this pod, heading into the spring game, coming out of that, to probably finish out this run here. One is Sam Williams-Dixon, number 669 player, number 57 running back in the country, who they're still recruiting a second running back, even if they get this kid, because he might end up being like a slot receiver. He's more of an athlete than not. There's a couple of places they may be able to play him here. So that's one guy to watch. And the other guy is Reggie Powers, number 579 player, number 51 safety in the country, also an Ohio kid who this might be a big safety class, and this is another in the line of like Armstrong, Nave, get these Ohio kids in early so then we can spend the rest of the time focusing on some of these bigger names like KJ Bolden and other people around the country who will be here this summer. So that's 2 guys to continue to watch who should be here for the spring game. As far as most important, when we're talking about momentum, let's go back to wide receiver because that's where we're 5-star Josiah Trader, the number 16 player, the top athlete. That's how he's classified, but Heartline's recruiting him. So guess what he's going to be playing if he comes to Ohio State. He also goes to the same school as Jeremiah Smith, which is Chaminade Madonna.
God, what kind of high school passing game is that?
It's elite. But also Kenyatta Jackson from that high school, Ryan and Turner from that high school. It's one of the more prominent high school football programs in the country down there, who just so happen to have 2 of the craziest skill position guys in the country in this 2024 class. He will be up here with Jeremiah Smith. They're like best friends. And Jeremiah has, of course, become the most active person on social media over the past month through all this, and obviously is being recruiting him hard. Another guy, Kamarian Franklin, the number 39 player, the number 7 defensive lineman. Those are 2 guys I would keep an eye on. And then Jaden Jackson, number 475 player, number 45 defensive lineman. And then Booker Pickett. That's the other big-time national guy I think people should watch. Number 92 player, the number 6 edge rusher. I have a more consistent list on the site on cleveland.com, so you guys can really check that out. But those are just some names that I would watch for this weekend. Some big-time wide receivers, some pretty notable defensive linemen. So it's not the largest group like we see sometimes during the season or in the summer, but it's a quality group that I think you should be looking out for on Saturday during the spring game.
And just to double check on this, Bryce West and Aaron Scott as 2 Ohio corners who are top 100 national players. Is Ohio State just in good shape with them? They're not on commitment. Where do those guys stand?
I have no reason to believe that they won't eventually be the Ohio State guys. They're just taking their time and doing what they do. I would expect Aaron Scott just put out a top 12, which, I mean, those lists can mean a lot of different things. Ohio State's closer to 1 than they are 12 on that list. I would expect him to maybe pop sometime this summer because he wants to take his visits. And then Bryce West is a Glenville kid. And, I mean, Doug, you've probably this program enough. Those Glenville kids like to take forever because they like to take their visits and they like to take their teammates and high school friends with them all over the place because that's the Ted Ginn senior way. So I would expect Ted Ginn Jr. took up to the All-American game, and we knew where he was going. So I would expect Bryce West to take this into November, December, maybe even pop at one of those All-American bowl games because – listen, man, when you go to Glenville, it's all about the experience. But I see no reason why they both won't end up being Ohio State guys. It just might take a while for them to actually do it.
No, it's because Ted Ginn Sr. is a genius.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think who it was. I don't think it was Marcus Hall. I think it might have been another. I think there was a Glenville offensive lineman one time that, like, late in the process made a visit to USC, and everybody was like, oh, and it was like, I'm going to Los Angeles.
Literally.
I want to go to Los Angeles, and then I will come home and I will play for Ohio State. But right now, I'm going to Los Angeles for free. And it's like, I think you are doing this right. So, okay, let's get into the NIL part of this, and NIL and what it means for football recruiting, because stuff is changing, and we'll do that next on Buckeye Talk. All right, so I've been teasing this quote. Stephen, you kind of talked about it. This is what Ryan Day said that I think is the most important thing he said all spring, and I think I wrote it down word for word. I think we're in a better place to compete for some of the bigger guys in the country from a recruiting perspective. So I think that's recruiting strategy. I think that's the ability of your assistant coaches to go out and do it. But I certainly think part of that is NIL. So, Nathan, the NIL part of that, when you heard Ryan Day say that, did that sound, I think maybe I threw some NIL stuff, collective stuff into the question. Did that sound like at least a partial NIL response to you? And if he feels that way, why does it make sense that he should?
Well, it did, because if you go back to what we were talking about before, the ramp up to last year's signing day, NIL was what they thought the big deficiency was. And some of that was because there are teams who will play in that sphere in a way that Ohio State won't. Ohio State is not going to run afoul of the NCAA guidance and give things to recruits, or even really promise things to recruits. Like they are playing things by the book from the administration on down. So what does Ohio State then do as a response to that? We told people a while ago that Ohio State was working on something that was going to bring them more in line with just sort of pointing at cohesion and saying we're like unified with them. What happened with cohesion was what you saw in the last couple of days with the 1870 Society, which is Gary Marcinnik, who's the guy who started cohesion, was also one of the people who got this other organization off the ground. And the point of this is that it works in it's a for-profit organization as opposed to Cohesion and the Foundation, which are nonprofit. And it basically just there are avenues that the nonprofits can't bring in income through. They, if you go to Wendy's, which has a marketing budget, they don't really need your help from a charity standpoint. And that's what all the things have been set up for with these other collectives. This new collective wants that marketing budget. It wants to set up marketing opportunities. There's obviously a lot of corporations based in Columbus, but it can go beyond that. That's where that new money would be. So the whole point of this is that on top of what Ohio State's already doing for current student athletes, which people have never really complained about, like the money's always been there from an NIL standpoint if you're a current athlete, on then adding this on top of that, enhancing this, will be a enough money that recruits won't be able to ignore that they will then be able to say, well, maybe you're not giving me a bag right now, but look at what all Ohio State athletes have access to. This is clearly a national leading thing. That's how they're trying to answer those deficiencies from before.
So let me read from the website. I found this about the 1870 Society. The 1870 Society is an initiative to honor the history and accomplishments of the American Fisheries Society and recognizing those generous individual donors who make it wait, this is okay, that's a different 1870. There's a lot of things that happened in 1870, and everybody names their society after the thing that happened in 1870. Syracuse has a thing. Syracuse University has an 1870 thing. Ohio State University was founded in 1870. So don't get fooled. Don't give your money to fish. Nathan, is that a worry? Are they worried that people will accidentally donate to fish?
No, I think they're more worried that people just won't donate, which has been that's what they've been driving for. I think they would almost take somebody accidentally donating to fish as a step in the right direction.
So I don't know if you want to give a percentage or I don't know what. The three pools of donations that creates the opportunity to give money to players. We can get back into giving to recruits versus giving to current players. And they earn it. They're not handing out money. It's like they earn it with their skills and their status. So there's corporations, where a corporation can decide, we want to invest in this. And again, Columbus, we always thought, hey, Columbus has more corporations than East Lansing, right? That should be good. Okay, corporations. There's super rich individual people, which is like the guy at Miami who got the Cavender twins and who got Nigel Pack, right? The Cavender twins helped get the Miami women's basketball team, the Elite Eight. Nigel Pack left Kansas State, helped get the Miami basketball team, men's team, to the Final Four. Bang for the buck, man. Whoever that dude is, right? I hope he's happy because it worked. And then there are the people who listen to Buckeye Talk who are like, I have $50, I have $20, I have $100, I want to help. Can you at least rank in order what is the most impactful group from the people you've talked to in terms of, or that's really going to make the biggest difference for Ohio State, that these collectives are the most interested in? And if you are a person with $20 or $50, don't be offended, because we're people with $20 or $50. But if they categorize the giant corporations or the millionaires first, that's okay. They'll still take your money if you want to give it. What's the order?
Oh, and just to be clear, like Ohio State, and I shouldn't even say Ohio State, the collectives, when I talk to them, like they want all of those. Like they are setting up. That's why this new collective has come up, because they want all of those. If you're taking the three verticals, which is like Buckeye Nation, and then that's one vertical, and then one vertical is like high, what would we say, like high income individuals, like people who have
rich
maybe a little
dudes.
bit more.
What are you?
Well, but I want to
rich dudes.
Yeah, right. But I want to make sure that is separated then from corporations, right? So then that's like the third thing. They want all of those things, but the what's important about this 1870 society thing is, or whatever for-profit one comes up, is that with the foundation and with Cohesion, there are guidelines that they have to follow legally as far as how that money goes out, who it goes to. Amounts can be capped somewhat depending on their policy. 1870 society is going to be able to operate without those restrictions. So that money comes in and then it can go back out more directly in, I think, in bigger lumps. Now there's still going to have to be, it's still going to have to be for something. It's not pay for play. You would have to still be doing an endorsement or an appearance, whatever, for a certain company, certain brand. But
and that's everybody. Like the Miami guy supposedly is doing that.
And there are some things though with, I mean, yeah, more or less, like the greater, but that is happening other places, yes. And what hasn't necessarily happened, what hadn't happened, is a combination of things, which is someone of just one big mega donor at Ohio State stepping up like that. But then also number two, the Ohio State administration, again, having a maybe more conservative approach to this. And we'll see over time whether that was prudent or not, because the dust hasn't completely settled on the legalities around some of these things. But the point that I think has caused tension in the football program, and maybe all programs, but certainly between the football program administration, was them looking at other programs doing it and saying like, well, there's no punishment here. Like, what are we're losing guys. Yeah. And so this new thing, it doesn't delve into the dirtier parts of it, for lack of a better term. They're not going to be buying recruits, but they plan for it to bring a new revenue stream that they haven't been tapping and getting it to their best athletes in potentially bigger amounts.
Okay, because that's too short answer because NIL makes me fall asleep.
Sure.
1870 can bring in more big-time corporate donations than the other two collectives. Yes or no?
Yes.
The 1870 Society can give out bigger chunks of money to elite Ohio State athletes. Yes or no?
Yes.
The 1870 Society will make a bigger impact on Ohio State's ability to recruit top players and retain top players than the other two collectives. And if you need to break that up into two separate, let's do recruit first. The 1870 Society will have a bigger impact on Ohio State's ability to recruit top players than the other two collectives. Yes or no?
They believe so. They feel like even though these two collectives have been doing good things, it hasn't been enough. If that's
okay,
maybe that's the best way to say it.
And Ryan Day brought up the thing the other day about like transfer portal. Well, we don't lose a bunch of guys. And Shahan and I were talking about this in the College Football Survivor Show. You have to do the portal in the full equation. You can't just do in. You have to do out. And I think Shahan mentioned on the podcast that like Texas A&M's had 27 transfers this offseason. It's insane. We did a thing the other day. Texas A&M, when they had the number one recruiting class last year, whatever it was, they had 30 guys. 7 of them already left after 1 year. The year before that, Texas A&M had the number 9 recruiting class in the country. They lost 7 of their top 10 players from that class after 2 years already. So there's like this smoke screen of recruiting that it's not real because you're not retaining anybody. So we have to keep that going. It feels like Ohio State has been effective in retaining players. And maybe that's culture, but it feels like there's some NIL stuff doing there because that's how Ryan Day always talked about it. Retention first. Recruiting, not as effective. 1870 Society is going to affect the recruiting more, even if they're not all the way to like paying recruits. But Stephen, this was also the phrase beyond that quote, Ryan Day saying, we're in a better place to compete for some of the bigger guys in the country. That's a big quote. The other thing he said, Stephen, was, I want to normalize NIL. And I think like that's a thing. And so they don't have to compete, and I don't think they ever will dollar for dollar with every Miami booster and everything Texas A&M's collectives do. But they just want to make it part of what they do in an out there way. They don't want to hide from it anymore. They can't hide from it. Mm-hmm. And they don't want people to feel dirty giving collectives money. Normalize NIL. I think that applies to the in, money coming in, but also the out. Hey, we got to keep up with getting money to players to get the best guys here. Isn't that valuable, Stephen?
It was. He also mentioned the fact that part of the reason the class was so small, to whatever extent, was they didn't lose a lot of guys to the transfer portal to further that point. That's not what's happening here. I think it's I don't want to say wholesome, but it does make it seems like a thing you can get behind more than last summer when you were at the thing and heard him go, you need 1.4 million to keep a roster together. Like that just, even if it's true,
no,
it
13
sounds
million. 13 million to keep a roster together.
13. Yeah. It just sounds dirty, right? If you're a fan hearing that sounds dirty because it's still so new. Saying things like you want to normalize NIL and you have these collectives that they're getting behind and they're doing ads for them, literally, like Gene Smith's in it, Marvin Harrison's in it, Brian Hartline's in it, Ryan Day's in it. It feels like it's more a part of what's going on rather than just what NIL has felt like it's been for the first year and a half of it. It's just we're throwing money at teenagers to come play college football for us, even if like they don't end up staying because they end up transferring 6 months later.
But to be clear, they're normalizing throwing money at teenagers. Like it's like the issue is they haven't been throwing enough money at teenagers, and they want.
Yeah, but you can shine it up a little bit and make it sound nicer.
No, that's what I mean. But it's not like it is. I mean, if you think it's dirty, it is dirty. They just want to make it sound clean. They want to normalize it. They don't want to change it. They want to, and I can't, there's only so much I can do. I can't only do so much of like the NCAA. They have rules. Nobody enforces them. I get it. This is the real world. And Ohio State is getting more active and wants fans to come along with it with no hesitation. And they think the result is, quote, we are in a better place to compete for some of the bigger guys in the country. That is the outcome of this. Why do they feel that way? Because they got their NIL stuff together. In conclusion, They're in a better place than they were in December. There were indications that something was coming that was going to make them feel better about it. It feels like this is it, Nathan, right? This 1870 Society, which is for profit, can get bigger donations. They can throw more money around without having to figure out if someone's going to a Boys and Girls Club or not. Just play with the big boys, not for all 28 recruits in the class, not for every, because that's what we're talking about. Ohio offensive linemen, not for 28 guys in the class, but for the guys who make a difference. For the targeted guys, for the Caleb Downs who went to Alabama, for the targeted guys, if this is what it takes, I don't know if it is. Jeremiah Smith seems all in. He's the best receiver in the country. If you've got to make sure every part of his recruitment is satisfactory, you've got to get that guy. Consternation was there. Action had to take place. It feels like in those 5 months, Nathan, action has taken place, and we may see the results on signing day in December.
And some of these things, it's not just like they figured this out in December and that was somebody snapped their fingers. Like some of these things have been in motion for months and months and months. But it's hard to start a company and
Yes.
line up the people that you want. And these things take some time. So, but they are progressing into new areas that they weren't previously tapping into. I think is just the best way to say it. And as far as, that's just the best way to say it. The point of this new society, this new collective, is that they will now be able to tap into money that they weren't previously tapping into,
and then spending it on players, even if because we're normalizing it. We're
Correct.
normalizing.
Yes, but I'm waiting to see whether, because right now I was actually told this week that like if they get $100,000 donation, one of these, and I've heard this before, the nonprofit collectives, they get $100,000 from somebody, they can't just turn right around and give $100,000 to a player. Usually, even if it's like connected to something they do for a charity, because well, actually I was told there's one exception right now. You can probably guess who that is, that he can probably just name his price right now on this roster because his national brand, Marvin Harrison Jr.'s national brand, is like that. But you can't just do it for any player. They feel like they have to justify it. I'm curious how this new collective is going to be set up, whether you will see more a more liberal spending is maybe the best way to say it.
More of it and more spent. And the thing of it is, right, you can feel Ohio State, as Stephen, as you said, man, there's Gene Smith's right there in the 1870 Society video stuff. They're also promoting all these other things they're doing with Cohesion and all these things they're doing with the foundation. And there still feels like a little competition in there, which I guess, I don't know, it's fine. But it feels like Ohio State's arms are fully around this 1870 thing. And one of the TV guys was like, so Ryan, like you're the point man on NIL, right? And Ryan was like, no, because like you're not allowed to be that exactly. Right? Like that's like, oh, Ryan, you're just writing checks, aren't you? It's like, no, I'm not. But I did a video.
He wishes he could be sometimes. As much as he says he's got enough on his plate, if it meant that he could just go write checks and take care of the problem, I think he might take on that extra work.
It's like, why are you?
Yeah.
Hey, Ryan, why are you really giving up play calling? Well, so I can not be the official point guard for the collectives.
So, but they felt like they had to get something better than what they had, right? And like the proof, signing day is like tax day. It's like, are you balancing your budget? It's like, I don't know. I think we're okay. And then it's like, oh, the IRS comes calling. And then you know if you did it right or not. Did I have enough tax taken out this year? Did they take? Then you know. On signing day, it's like, oh, is NIL in good shape? And then you had like 4 guys on signing day. They're like, oh, we thought we did a lot of good recruiting there, and they signed elsewhere because we couldn't compete on NIL. The bill came due. So, as you said, Nathan, they've been working towards this, but the bill came due in December. Despite the fact that they signed the second highest rated class by star average, the bill came due, and they tried to change something. So I think that's all you can ask. And that's why I think there should be some optimism for a program that didn't have the signing day that it wanted to have in December, for a program that lost to Michigan. I think in both those areas, they're trying to change. Now, we won't know. We'll find out in the last Saturday in November. We'll find out on early December on signing day. Did the changes work? But what you couldn't do in both those areas was the same thing. Because neither of those days were good days for Ohio State. They were a good day. And Ryan Day got up there on signing day. Like, again, Jermaine Matthews is a good day, man. Brandon Ennis is a good day. We don't want to dismiss the guys who were here. but it wasn't as good a day as it could have been. So, in conclusion, I want Stephen, I'll give each of us like 30 seconds to say, how would we describe the place where Ohio State recruiting is now compared to it was in December? In strategy, in NIL, in everything. How would you describe what's evolved?
They've evolved how they approach their plans, what they decide to make plan A. They've also kind of changed how many resources they're going to put into certain things in terms of what's worth it and what's not with some of these national guys because of NIL, because of different factors. I think the best way I can describe it is there's a reason to be optimistic because they made changes that look like they may work. Now you've got 8 months to see if it actually does or not, but you can at least be optimistic about the fact that something didn't work and they didn't just sit on their butts and say, we're going to try it the same way next year and see if we can get a different result.
Nathan, how would you describe the evolution from your viewpoint?
Yeah, and I understand their hesitance and wanting a new approach, but you can't just not recruit the best players in the nation anymore if you think they're going to fit because they've been central to the great teams they've had in the last 10, 15 years. So they had to come up with a solution. I think they feel like they're moving in that direction. I think there is still concern or irritation at least about and still maybe some tension between Ohio State and its policy of following NCAA guidelines, sometimes even when they are more restrictive than the state guidelines, which NCAA defers to, and there are a bunch of teams that won't. A bunch of teams that are fully embracing the Wild West and getting away with as much as they can as it comes to recruiting.
I agree with both of you guys, so I don't have to say anything. Nathan, one last thing, though, and we always we want to gear our NIL discussions toward this. If there's a Buckeye fan listening to this podcast with $50, and now they have the Foundation, Brian Schottenstein and Cardale Jones, they have Cohesion, what's his name? Gary Marcinick?
Gary Marcinick,
right?
Yep.
And they have the 1870 Society, right? Where should they send their $50? Or are all reasonable answers right now?
Well, certainly either of the two nonprofit groups, and
which are the Foundation and Cohesion.
The Foundation
those
and
are
Cohesion.
nonprofit.
I think those are probably the most accessible right now to that group, that donor you're talking about. I don't know. I honestly just don't know yet how much what avenue there is between the 1870 Society and this, because again, I think it's so focused on like a bigger target. But that may prove to be a perfectly reasonable one as well.
They do have the 1870 Society has levels of things. The cheapest one, then when you go to the website, is $10 a month for almost like a subscription. Then it goes up to $25, $50,
Yeah.
$100, $250, $500, $1,000, and $5,000. But that's per month, I think.
Yeah,
right? Yeah,
I
that's per
believe
month. That's not like an individual donation.
The Foundation, I believe, has also added a recurring donation option. I can't actually remember off the top of my head whether Cohesion has or not. Some of those also, and I know we're talking football, some of them have the opportunity where you can say, hey, I'm donating this and I want it to go towards women's basketball or hockey or football. I think you can angle it towards a certain sport. I don't think you can give it straight to a certain player, but I think you can do it by sport.
And then they have business memberships on the 1870 side. The highest one is $500,000 a year. So they are set up for some big stuff. Okay, that will wrap it up. We will see you Saturday at the spring game if you are there. And I would suggest if you have a free Saturday and you can get there, it can be fun. Say hello. If you see Steven, you see Nathan, you see me, say hello. Say you listen to Buckeye Talk, because we appreciate you guys every day because you give us jobs. And we're going to try to give you some really good coverage from Saturday. So we'll do that in the text at 614-350-3315 if you want to sign up. We'll do that by writing at cleveland.com/OSU. And we will do that with a post-game Buckeye Talk that will be up on Saturday as soon as we can get it up. I would guess by dinner time for you guys. We'll see. That'll be the goal. For now, for Nathan Baird and Stephen Means, I'm Doug Lesmerises, and that was Buckeye Talk.